Welcome back to the Sparks IQ Virtual Selling Educational Web Series. This is episode 4, Backstage Selling. We're going to do a quick recap of what we covered in our previous episodes, and then we'll define and illustrate Backstage. Today, we are joined by Mark Magnecca, David Bowders, Mike Kunkel, and Doug Wyatt. Hello, fellas.
Hi there. Great to be here.
Hello. Glad to be here.
Great. To get us started, let's hear from our overseas correspondent.
All the time, the question is, how do democracies respond to those scandals?
And what will it mean for the wider region? I think one of your children has just walked in. I mean, shifting sands in the region. Do you think relations with the North may change?
I would be surprised if they do. Pardon me.
That's right.
My apologies.
What's this going to mean for the region?
My apologies. South Korea's policy choices on North Korea have been severely limited.
That guy didn't obey a key front stage best practice: lock the door. Okay, diving into things, Mark, would you remind everybody what we mean by orchestration and how it relates to virtual selling?
Yeah, sure. So orchestration is all about being able to unobtrusively pull things together to make them work. And so at the highest level, a maestro who's conducting an orchestra is not playing any instrument, him or herself, but rather they are orchestrating everybody else to make this beautiful music. And in the world of virtual selling, what we're finding is the very best sellers have this skill set, this capacity to organize and orchestrate their internal resources, their subject matter experts, their buyers, and being able to pull this together to make it a compelling buying experience. That's why so many experts are saying your ability to orchestrate is a critical skill on a go-forward basis as a seller.
Thanks, Mark. Anybody else want to chime in?
Yeah, Jason. So, Mark, we've talked about this in the past. It's one of the things I really love about the book. I actually have a background in music. I played professionally and I did conduct. And this concept, when I came into the field of sales, and trust me, it was not a smooth transition, but this concept of orchestrating really helped me a ton. And the other thing, of course, was the concept of practice and how musicians practice so much to get good at their craft. And I was able to use that in sales. So as bad as I was in the beginning, the practice and the concept of orchestration really helped me as a young seller.
So what do you hope sellers do differently during virtual sales interactions now that they're receiving some formal guidance?
Well, to start, Jason, everything a seller does should be buyer-centric, right? That includes providing an outstanding virtual buying experience. It's all about the orchestration that we've already talked about, executing the best practices of research, call planning, sales meeting management, facilitating engagement, and maximizing those things in that experience for the virtual setting. We've also talked about how documentation, collateral, and notes from the sales process could actually be used to create a better internal handoff to customer success or a service team, which also creates a better user experience for the buyers as well. Beyond that, I hope that sellers use these same knowledge, skill sets, and tool sets to more effectively manage the relationships in the account over time through virtual strategic and account management.
David, what are your thoughts on additional benefits of being excellent at virtual front stage selling?
Yeah, we all know that in recent years, the expansion of buying committees has become a tough reality for sellers. That is, there's more and more stakeholders on the buyer side. They have very specialized roles. Sometimes they're technical, sometimes they're HR, sometimes they are sales enablement, for example. Sometimes they could be financial buyers. All of these different parties, the reality is they're an important part of the buying decision. Now, unfortunately, in the old days, a poor seller had to go and deal with all these different specialties and try to address all of their needs and concerns to be successful selling. Today, we have the advent not only of committee buying, but also team selling. And with team selling, what we can do is start to bring in our own specialists. They don't all have to be in the same location. So once we remove the barrier of geography, we're able to start bringing in our specialists who can best engage the different buyer personas on the buyer side who have their own very specific, sometimes narrow needs.
Doug, anything that you want to add to that?
No, I think that's absolutely right, and I think we mentioned in a previous episode just about the ability to have specialists and experts be able to join when you're selling remotely in the way that you can't if everybody needed to coordinate their schedules to get on a plane and get to a certain location at the same time. So I think that's absolutely right.
Adding on to what Doug said, we all know that work from home is becoming the new norm, if you will, in the workplace. So if you want to be able to move the buying process along with your buyers, eventually you're going to have to master these skills. The buyers are not going to invite you into their kids' bedrooms. They're not going to invite you into their basement. They're not going to invite you into their house. So one or more of the buyers that you're trying to sell to is not going to be able to be there face to face. And it could very well turn out that none of them is available to meet with you face to face. So the reality is today, if you want to be able to sell in the new work from home norm, you're going to have to master virtual selling. It's that simple.
All right. So buyers are not going to invite you into their homes, but we are going to invite you to help us tackle a common myth associated with virtual selling. Let's do some debunking. So here's the myth. Buyers are not ready for virtual. Mike, please debunk.
Are you kidding me? Look, Bain & Company reported that 92% of B2B buyers prefer virtual sales interactions. I've seen another report saying that buyers are willing to make large six-figure purchases entirely virtually. Gartner did a study to show that about 44% of millennial buyers actually preferred not to engage with sellers and buy all on their own. Though interestingly, then about 1 in 5 of those have buyer's remorse because they're unsatisfied at the end with their purchase decision. So they're ready for virtual buying and yet still need expert support to make the best decisions. That support's different now, right? It's both front and backstage, synchronous, asynchronous, but it's still needed. In either case, it's pretty clear that the buyers are ready.
Well, there you have it. The data is there, and Mike Kunkel doesn't lie. So buyers are ready for virtual. Consider this myth debunked. All right, guys, let's talk about Backstage. What is it? Why do we do it? And when should we do these backstage activities? Mark, in your book, Mastering Virtual Selling, you talk a lot about the micro buying experience. And looking at the diagram, it's easy to see that there's more backstage than front stage. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Micro buying experience is the name we gave to what is, in effect, a 3-step dance, right? It's what happens before a live interaction. It's what happens during the live interaction. And it's what happens after that interaction. So we think of each one of those almost like a unit, and we call that a micro buying experience. And throughout a sales process, every time you're interacting virtually or in some cases in person, it's the same element. There's things that are happening before, there's things that are happening during when you're interacting live, and there's things that are happening afterwards. So an example of the before is being able to, in a virtual environment, send a quick introduction and agenda to help apprise people. This is what we want to accomplish on this particular call. Maybe it's connecting with them on LinkedIn in advance so that you know a little bit about each other. And then during a call, a live call, it could be dropping the agenda in the chat window and reminding people that they can use the chat to ask questions at any time. It is telling them that you're going to be recording the call. And the reason you're recording the call is you want to be able to, A, capture snippets from the call that could be shared with other people who aren't present on the call, number one. And number two, to be able to simplify the note-taking process, to be able to be more accurate by having a complete transcription of what's happened. And after the call, you take the transcription, you drop it right into your CRM, And the reason that's valuable is that on your next call, you can quickly review the notes, almost like a doctor reviewing the charts, and you can quickly remind yourself of exactly what was supposed to happen before this next call. And then finally, some examples of after the call has ended. We all know about the value of sending a thank you email. Well, what about a thank you video where there's a little bit of emotion and context, being able to summarize some of the key points? You could include some links to content, whether it's specific websites or a DSR, as we've talked about. And then finally, maybe taking one of the snippets from that recording, just 30 or 60 seconds, that somebody had called out as important, and be able to share that as well. So when you step back and you look at that, it's sort of a holistic before, during, and after that is the microbiome experience.
That brings me to my next question for you, Mark, and it has to do with one of my favorite concepts in your book, presence in your absence. So can you, first of all, tell everybody what you mean by that? And then tell us how a salesperson can go about achieving it.
Well, if you think about the way most of us work as human beings, there's a thing called the law of recency. And the law of recency is we tend to remember the thing that happened to us most recently. So just as an example, let's pretend you were looking at a car to buy, and you looked at one car on March 15th, and you looked at one car on April 15th, and you looked at another car on May 15th. And now you're going to make a decision to buy a car on May 21st. Well, the car that you saw most recently is the one most top of mind. You may have forgotten about things you really liked about the car you saw back in March, or even the one in April. So the question becomes, how do you stay top of mind? Now, the thing is, most of the great brands understand this. There's a reason you see the Nike swoosh. There's a reason you see Apple's logo in so many different places, because one of the elements of branding is to create presence in your absence. It's to remind you about that product, even though you may not be owning it or using it at that moment. In a similar way, by having a strategy and knowing full well that you've met with a potential buyer who's a prospect now, and that you have just set your next meeting up and it's not for 30 days. The simple way to think about this is, what am I going to do so that 2 weeks from now, I am back top of mind and having some interaction with them, that they're thinking about what we're going to do, so that not a full month has gone by and now we have to start back and kind of rewind the clock. So at the highest level, creating presence in your absence is simply the catchphrase we use to help make sure you stay top of mind. And there's a number of different technology tools that can help make it easy to do this.
I think for any seller who's ever had a deal basically stall or turn out with a loss or closed no opportunity, one of the things they probably are wondering is, what happened? And this is what I call what the buyer is doing behind your back. We know that just because we're not meeting face-to-face with our buyers doesn't mean their buying process has come to a standstill. They're still looking for more information. They're still evaluating alternatives. These are the activities that we need to be a part of. If we want to do that, we have to have a very concrete strategy, and we also have to have practical tactics for how to create presence in our absence.
Doug, you've mentioned repeatedly the need for sellers today to remain top of mind through the entire buying journey. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think it's critical, and I think we know, and anybody in sales fundamentally understands that there's buying happening at times that are different necessarily than when you're on the call. There's certainly the buying process is happening while you're live on a call with somebody, but it's also happening at other times. And so being able to own that buyer journey, even when you're not synchronously and communicating with them, is really critical. Recently, my wife and I bought some exterior French doors for our house, and we actually had a tale of two vendors that we were considering for this, and one that really did great orchestration, like we're talking about, and one that basically insisted on having a live sales process in the way that things were done years ago. So the one that kind of did things in a little bit of old school way. They scheduled the time, and then the day before I was required to call in so that I could confirm my appointment. And of course, they did some old school stuff like, hey, I need to know that your wife is going to be there, which it's probably not very professional. And it's the equivalent in B2B, like saying, well, I'm only going to meet with you if your boss is going to be there. Then this vendor came out and spent 90 minutes of my time and my wife's time just going through every feature and benefit. The whole thing was a pre-planned script and process. And it wasn't very buyer-centric at all, but it also was a huge time suck. In contrast, there was another vendor who did the first part of the conversation over the phone with me, spent 5 to 10 minutes, and then basically said, I'm going to come out next week and we'll look at the area you want to put these doors in. But in the meantime, here's a website you can go to and actually configure the layout of the doors you want, the style of the doors, what knobs you want, all that kind of stuff. So do that and then send me a screenshot of what you come up with. And then I'll have that in mind when I come out and we can talk about where the fit is. But it also allowed me to self-serve part of that conversation and focus on what's important. So when I'm actually spending time with that vendor, it's actually stuff that's relevant to making the solution work for me versus just pitching me features and benefits. And guess what? When I went to that website he gave me, I also looked at the quality of the doors. They happen to be manufactured, an hour down the road from my house. I learned about the product information I needed to know to make my decision. When the guy came out, he was here for 20 minutes, did his measurements, and the rest of the time was spent, with me self-serving, and he had presence in his absence with me because I was able to self-serve parts of the buying process that I wanted to, and I wasn't necessarily being forced into 90 minutes of this commitment and this entire sales process that wasn't built for the way I wanted to buy.
Yeah, I think what we're learning from Doug's story is even though we're primarily talking here about complex B2B selling, what we're seeing is that the same disciplines, the same strategies and tactics that lead to success in B2B are also working their way into B2C, selling directly to the consumer. And I would take it even a step further. The same strategies, tactics, models that help us to sell are also important to the customer experience. So even once we've sold the deal, we're never really done selling. Let's be honest, we're never really done selling. We have to continue to engage our buyers even after the sale. And this is where the selling process and virtual selling transforms into virtual customer experience. And that's why I believe a lot of what we're talking about in this series is applicable not just to the frontline sellers that we're trying to help, but also to the downstream customer experience, customer support, customer success teams that are trying to drive the results that the sellers have sold. So fundamentally, this is an organization-wide mandate. It's not just for sellers. It's not just for buyers. It's for everybody who has a customer-facing or vendor-facing type of relationship.
That's right.
And Doug, I'm guessing that the time you spent on that website didn't feel like a time suck. You got similar information that the time suck guy was trying to give you, but you were able to draw the conclusions yourself about the quality.
I was able to consume just the amount of information I need for my buying decision from that website, and not things I didn't see necessary. I didn't need, the first guy shined a red light through to show how thick the glass was. It was ridiculous. If you could just tell me that it was going to be temperature resistant and all those things, that's what I needed to know. I needed to know it was going to fit my needs. I didn't need to know the technical specs or that there's 3 layers of whatever, you name it. So long story short, I bought it from the first guy. No kidding.
Good for him.
And we know who makes the decisions in your house.
Good thing my wife was there, right?
So Mike, along those lines, what are some types of content that sellers might share in between their front stage live interactions?
Yeah, so it could be something like third-party collateral. Maybe it's analyst reports, might be relevant research that would interest them or be helpful. Testimonials or case studies from similar customers are always good at the right point. Might even be information about your company, plans, product roadmaps, or similar updates when those things are relevant, not product pitchy, right? Might even just be simple things like answers to their questions, a document you provided that they can review that would answer questions. Really, Jason, is anything that might satisfy their exit criteria for the current process stage or address a concern that they've expressed somewhere along the journey. And once they're a customer, Jason, it could even include ongoing reports about account performance and especially any documentation about cost savings, problem solved, and any value that you've delivered for your client that matters to them.
Thanks, Mike. And of course, we want you to be able to create top quality backstage content, some of which might include recording yourself. So Jeanette is back with a segment on virtual backgrounds. Jeanette, let's talk tech.
I'm here to talk about virtual backgrounds. What are they? Why do we use them? And what can you do to make yours look better? So many people are working from home now, and that means we have to compete with a lot of distractions. Whether that be kids, pets, home repairs, or that mess that you just haven't gotten around to cleaning up yet. In lieu of sending your kids off to boarding school, you can use the virtual background. So it's almost like they're not even there. There are a few ways to do this, depending on which video conferencing tool you're using. Most of them are very similar. If you're in Zoom, click the caret next to the camera icon right here. Then select Choose Virtual Background. You can stick with a good old-fashioned blurred background or try out any of the other default options. I've uploaded a branded image with my company logo. Don't be worried if text looks like it's mirror image. You're the only one who sees it like that. Everyone else in your meeting sees it the right way, but if it bothers you, you can uncheck Mirror My Image. There are lots of free high-resolution photos online. Unsplash, for example, has several pictures of offices you can download. Just click this plus button right here to upload your new image. If you have lots of stuff behind you, Zoom may have a hard time replacing your background perfectly. That's where green screens come in. This one hangs right here, so the back of your chair disappears too. The cool thing about video conferencing apps like Zoom is that some of them have an I have a green screen button. Once you select it, you're going to want to check this little button here. Select the green behind you, and in this case, Zoom will automatically remove all of the green color and replace it with my virtual background.
All right, more great tips from Jeanette. So, if you're going to record a welcome video, consider using a virtual background, and they're obviously great for your front stage calls as well. And that's it for this one. Be sure to check out our next episode where we dig into possibly the most important and most impactful element of virtual selling, Backstage best practices. But before we go, I'm feeling spiritual, so let's join together in virtual prayer.
Signore, tutte le nostre sofferenze, le nostre difficoltà, i momenti difficili che stiamo vivendo, in modo particolare in questo momento. Preghiamo perché il Signore ci liberi da tutti questi mali e in modo particolare dai nostri peccati.
Amen. I have to thank David, Doug, Mike, and Mark for a great episode, and we'll see you all back here for Backstage Best Practices. Goodbye, everybody.